everybody. Welcome to Mornings with Miller, Thursday mornings. We're going to do, we do 15 minutes of content, 15 minutes of discussion. This might run over in content a little bit, but this morning we're going to talk about the unassigned experience. So this is a research document that was put out by Herman Miller prior to COVID, but I feel like there's a lot of things that are still on their way with the unassigned experience, and we're going to talk about what makes a successful workplace strategy around being unassigned. So there's some just research on activity-based work to free address. We know that there are about 82% of large organizations reported an increase in unassigned seating. So this was a study done probably like 2019. And then we also know that 52% of corporate executives will implement some sort of level of unassigned seating in the next 3 years. And that's a survey that came from CBRE. 38% of executives are talking about doing partially unassigned environments, and then 14% to do unassigned seating for everybody. So if you're looking at that, it's going to be either a mix. And I think with COVID and people using real estate a little bit differently, I think we're definitely going to see a shift in how we're using our real estate, when people will be there, and how we can make unassigned work and make our real estate work best for us. So I guess I should say that we have this research document, and there's case studies and different things in it, and I'd love to send it to anybody who's interested in the full study. We're just going to do a quick overview today, but if you're interested in this, definitely just shoot me or Robin an email, and we'll mail it to you directly, because I'm going to reference this as we talk today, but I'm going to it's definitely more in depth than what we're going to do in our 15-20 minute time slot. So one of the things I do want to mention is that the top 5 reasons that unassigned is so popular is that, and this came from IFMA, we're talking about a better work-life balance, organizational growth, advancements in technology, increased productivity, and alignment with organizational goals. And that was in order of why unassigned has become so popular. The one thing that we know is that adoption can be really slow and inconsistent to an unassigned environment. So if people have typically gone from an assigned seat to an unassigned seat, we know that about 71% of people do most of their daily tasks in the exact same setting all day. And we know that that adoption is not exactly leading to success. So we know that there are 4 factors that influence the unassigned experience, and from a macro level to a micro level, it would be culture, management, resources, and then states of mind. So it's going to be all the way down to the individual and how they feel in the space, up until how the culture is reinforcing an unassigned environment. So the thing that's really interesting about learning the success of why unassigned environments work, there are thriving behaviors and coping behaviors from people. And these are taken from the research that we have done, or the research we have, collaborated on. But thriving behaviors talks about people moving around a lot, using the space to their advantage, thinking about how it supports them. And coping behaviors are where people will feel like they are outside of their comfort zone. They feel like they don't have any control. And we're going to talk about the 2 thriving behaviors that we see in an unassigned environment and the 3 coping behaviors. And then in the booklet, if you're interested in getting the booklet, we're talking about how to kind of have those environments are how our environments are helping, how do we shift the mindset in the environments to make things more successful for the unassigned environment. All right, so so when we're diagnosing the behaviors, we have to think about the culture of the people and the way the environment and the management environment, but we're looking at thriving behaviors being people who explore and people who connect. And so you'll see some quotes around that. And then the coping behaviors when we move to an unassigned environment are places like doing hoarding, settling into one space, or anchoring. So we're going to talk briefly about each one of those behaviors. So a thriving behavior when we move to an unassigned environment is exploration. And so what we see with the exploration is it sparks creativity, productivity, and give people a sense of freedom. So they have the choice, the autonomy to select where it is they want to be, where they know the environment will best help them do their work. We talk about why it's important, finding spots in your space that make you feel more inspired to do the work that you need to do. And then also knowing that you have some more focus because you have removed yourself from all of your things and you're able to focus directly on the work. The ways to encourage exploration is to think about a variety of ways that people can sit or where they can sit or where they can stand. Having access to the right technology and tools to do their jobs. So making sure that there's only, if the monitors that they need to do their jobs are a variety of different settings and different places throughout the space. One of the biggest things is really teaching people how to use space. I think we all understand from a version like we know how to use space, but do we really know how to use the space effectively for what we need to do? And I think it's really important that as designers, as we create spaces, that we are able to take a task and tell our clients how to use the space effectively. And that's part of a change management, making sure that we explain that directly to our clients and have the clients bring it through to to their users every day. And that's part about a culture. So I often have conversations with designers about, are they in charge of changing the culture for a company, or is the design there to support the change in culture? And sometimes I think we have a very heavy lift as designers being asked to change a culture through space, but it really is it's a partnership and understanding how to get a company to reinforce culture through space and space to reinforce their culture. So another thriving behavior is connect. So we know that if you have unassigned seating, there's a lot of benefits to having people sit in different spaces. So it's about sparking creativity. It's about networking throughout the organization, knowing people outside of your team, more opportunity to collaborate and be more social. We know that people stay at work when they have a best friend at work, and sometimes their best friend is not the person who works on their team. So knowing that you're creating a collaborative environment outside of teams is really important. Encouraging connection. Find places so that people can share work outside of their team environment. Think about ways for people to connect almost accidentally, force those connections. And then there's an expectation about office etiquette to ensure that every single level follows this. So there's a lot of opportunity when we're talking about connection spaces, that everybody from the CEO level down, everybody has to follow the same protocol and the office etiquette around using these kinds of spaces. So the rules apply to all. So the next couple behaviors that we're going to talk about are, these are coping behaviors. So when people feel uncomfortable in their space, these are the kinds of behaviors that they tend to exhibit, but these are things that we want to discourage. So hoarding. So hoarding happens when people feel like they don't have enough for them, and they start to save and reserve resources just in case they might need them. We see this kind of thing with meeting spaces in particular. If they don't feel like there's enough meeting spaces, people will tend to make sure they always have a meeting space available to them. They will book the meeting spaces, make sure that only they can use them, even if they're not using them. We see the same thing happening with resources around, if you can reserve your desk, you may reserve your desk even though you're not going to use it that day, but just in case you need it. And people hoard because there are not enough resources, or if they don't feel like there are enough resources for everybody to be in the space at the same time. And so it's really important to think about making sure technology is available, making sure there really is a space for everybody, but not maybe it's an unassigned, and how do people use the unassigned spaces. So this is something that we see pretty often. Obviously, humans do this with quarantine. There was a paper product shortage. People were hoarding because they were afraid they weren't going to have any, but we have to just make sure that when we talk about unassigned spaces, how do we encourage the kind of behavior that people realize there are tons of things available to them, and that everybody is part of the bigger community. The other thing that we find is a coping behavior is called settling. So settling is when a team always works exactly in the same space. They create an unofficial territory. It's their club. You can't be in it. You can't sit with us. It is a group of friends. It is frequent collaborators. It is about people that always want to sit in the same space so they can be with each other. What happens with that is that those people don't meet other people. They don't use the resources throughout the space. They don't inspire each other from different cross teams. So it's really important when you're thinking about settling is how do you create space so that people who work on the same team do not have to sit together, but that they can still have access to each other, to be near each other if they do need to talk. So it is something about, this is a behavioral thing, but it's how do we create space to make sure people aren't settling into the same kind of neighborhood every single day with the same exact people. And then our final coping behavior, and I think this one is one that people will tend to really relate to, is anchoring. The person who finds their favorite spot and that's where they sit every day, all the time, whether it's about being seen so they can be seen by their boss. They sit right outside the boss's office. They want to be available. They want to be seen. They want to feel like they're working. It's people that like the one window spot, so that's always where they sit. We know that there's also a behavior that people always want to sit in the same space, and that's because they want people to know that they're there and working, because the cultural shift from assigned to unassigned is that if they are not where they're supposed to be, they're not working. And we know that that's not the case, especially now. People can do work anywhere, and people should select the spaces that best support the work that they're doing. So anchoring sometimes, and that's that 71% of people in an unassigned environment sit in the same place every day and do their job in the same exact spot. We want to encourage movement, and this is really going to come from a top level down situation, having CEOs, having the C-suite really explain how to use spaces, encouraging people to answer their emails in a great lounge chair by a window and do it on their phone because it changes the environment, have a cup of coffee. It's about making sure there's plenty of open desks in neighborhoods that have popular features. So if you realize that certain kind of work has to be done on the larger monitors, make sure that those monitors are available in different locations so that people select different places. So these are the behaviors that we're seeing, and we have some answers again in this book talking about ways to kind of motivate different directions. And if we're talking about change management, or we're talking about how to explain to people how to use their space, these are some behaviors that you can reference to talk about coping versus thriving. We definitely want more thriving behaviors. So if we're talking about some key insights for successful unassigned experience, encourage movement. How do you get people to get up, walk around, see what's available to them? Thinking about warmth and character, it's going to make people want to be in spaces that feel comfortable. And I think after COVID, we're definitely going to see people wanting to sit on their sofa again, but maybe it's not in their home. So how do you create the home environment at a workplace if that's where people need to be to do their jobs? And then clarifying protocols. Again, it's that whole conversation about, does design inform culture or does culture inform design? And it is not one direction. It has to be a partnership. So we can design the most beautiful spaces with the best tools. And if everybody anchors and never uses the space, then then the job was all for naught. So how do we figure out how to, make sure that the protocols are being enforced and that everybody from the top down is using the space the most effectively? Because as designers, we want our spaces to be used the way that they're intended. So are there any questions or comments or thoughts? It's a lot of information.
I think the part specifically about, causing people to thrive and not just, survive during these times is such a critical message and so important to what we're all trying to do right now. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Yeah, oh, go ahead.
I think it's telling when we interview people for like programming that when they say, I have to sit at my desk, I need all my things, you can't make any changes, perhaps that it's not that person, it's like that company is not setting them up to thrive, so to speak.
Absolutely. And that's definitely in the book. There's some different things that talk about ways to encourage connections, to ways to encourage or discourage hoarding. So we'll make sure to get the book to you, Carly. One of the questions came through, Rebecca said, is this an issue with COVID? Is it healthier to keep your germs in one spot?
That's what I was going to ask. I feel like this is research is before, COVID time, and you can't rely. I'm not going to trust somebody else to clean off their spot sufficiently before I go and sit there. So I'm kind of like, unassigned.
For sure. So I think what we're seeing is that right now we're in like unfortunately, we're in this like weird time capsule of germs are bad. Don't touch my stuff. I don't want to be around other people. And I think as we cycle out of there's, obviously there's a vaccine on the horizon, which is great. And I think, a year from now, the conversations will be very different. But I think we are going to have some residual emotions around how we work. And it's going to be, I can do my job at home today. I don't need to be in the office. And and I think companies have seen a lot of success in people being home and not having to be in the office, while also seeing some disconnect because people aren't there. So there's still going to be a need for some sort of home space, some office space, some place where people their culture is reinforced. But people are not going to be there the way that they used to be. And so I think we're going to see a lot more discussion around unassigned environments. I think right now we're in a holding pattern about cleanliness. And I think in particular, there will be a generation of people that will see people standing really close and be like, they're too close to me. I don't like that. But I think there is going to be a swing to more unassigned environments that are more purposeful. And the cleanliness, we're going to have, obviously, there's going to be a crazy uptick in what are required by organizations to keep things clean. And there's going to be some community, version of that is like, you are to wipe down all your space when you're done. The space is not yours. Like, there's going to be some protocols in that as well. But I think right now, Alex, I think what you're talking about is this is not a conversation this is a future conversation, thinking about the things that we need to know when our clients come to us and say, we're not using all of our real estate. How do we do this better?
Agreed.
Yeah, we're definitely in a don't touch me. I still watch, I watch television shows and I'm like, those people are awfully close to each other. I'm like, it's not real life. I have to relax.
Seriously, it's stressful to watch sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
It is. It's really weird. And so does anyone watch Law and Order?
I don't.
No, I just have to say, so they had their first episode of SVU last week since COVID. So everybody's wearing masks and whatever, but it was driving me crazy because every time they went to talk to each other close, they'd take their masks off. And I'm like, you're not doing it right. You're not doing it right. Crazy.
Even the TV shows can't figure out how to wear a mask appropriately. God. I think it's interesting. We have a couple of things talking about missing energy from the office. I think we're going to start seeing, like, in Herman Miller speak, we call these plaza spaces. Like, plazas are where you are seen, where you want to be seen, where you want to run into your coworkers, where you want to grab a quick coffee and talk, or do your emails, where the spontaneous collaboration begins but doesn't end. So I think we're going to see more of that kind of dedicated space, more of like an actual town hall hubs kind of space where people connect, because I think we're going to see people who, I would say we had a co-working space before this, and sometimes I just went there because I wanted to be around other people, grab coffee, say hello. And I know, and then my work was being done, heads down in an office space. And I think I've been mobile for over 10 years. I think Robin's been the same way. We definitely look for those kinds of, interactions, and those, liken them to like city parks. When you go to the park, you definitely are going to run into your neighbors, and you can start the conversation there, but you can walk back to your houses and finish the conversation. So Alex put a good point in here. Wherever they put coffee, people will gather. Food, people, drinks, people, absolutely. I think you're right. I think it's about the kind of amenities you put in a space that bring people together is going to be a big conversation.
Great. Sam, I had an interesting, it's Betsy, conversation with a client yesterday because they struggled with trying to reconfigure their office. And they actually started discussing, and I think this is going to start happening, is that as people see that a vaccine is coming, companies that have been wanting to try and make some changes in their office are going to step forward and want to do it. Because that's actually what this client said was, we don't have our people in our office. We can actually now consider reconfiguring our stations before everybody comes back.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
It happens the next month or two.
No, I think we're going to see some stuff. I mean, when I listened to the news this morning, they're saying springtime for full implementation of the vaccine. So I think we're going to start to see people at the turn of the year saying, okay, we've been paying rent and we know like you're going to see a lot of surveys going out about what people plan to do on return. We know that there's a very small amount of people that want to return to the office 100%. It's in like the 20s. But everybody else is looking at, 4 days a week in the office, 3 days a week in the office. And how do we make sure that we're utilizing our real estate in a way that makes sense for our people? And I think also thinking about how people have worked. Granted, we know that like the hard kitchen chair in front of the kitchen table doesn't always support you the best, but sometimes it's great. Sometimes that's the perfect place to get your work done, depending on what you have to do. And then sometimes you need a desk and sometimes you need a sofa. So it really depends on how you need to use your space. And people have gotten used to that movement in their homes. I mean, even working outside, I've had so many calls with people that are sitting outside, not when it's 35 degrees, but in the summer, a lot of conference calls were done with people outside. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot of the utilization, how we worked at home, transferring into the office, which I think is such a welcome change for a lot of designers I know who've been pushing these ideas with the client pushback. And I think now that everybody has proof of this, everybody knows what it's like. So I think we may be in a good spot to make some really cool helping the cultural shifts of companies.
Sam, it's Mike. The point that you made that resonated the most with me was about the message having to come from the top. I think sometimes the facilities people understand that this needs to happen, but unless employees see the CEO and the COO utilizing those spaces, there's a fear still that you're not doing your work if you're not sitting at a desk.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that you say that. So we have an example from Herman Miller that when we did our greenhouse facility, Greenhouse.
Design
oh my
yard.
gosh, I haven't been there in so long. This is really sad.
Design yard.
What was that?
Design yard.
Thank you. Design yard. Oh my goodness. When we did our design yard facility, one of the stories is that we implemented this great plaza with this like 30-foot coffee bar and all these great lounge spaces and different ways to sit, different postures, and nobody used it. Like nobody. And here we are. We've done tons of research on that these spaces work, and we've done all this work to implement it, and nobody's using it. And so our workplace team went to the C-suite and said, you need to be in the space. You need to use the space. They added, there's an IT help desk that sits at the end of the coffee bar in the mornings, every day of the week. They started figuring out how to get people to shift into that space. And so our C-suite was scheduled in to go sit there specific times of the day, to do their meetings there, to be seen, to encourage people to come in. And now our plaza space, if you go out to Design Yard, it is, I would say like 10-ish to like 11:30. There was not a seat to be had. And at the same time, in like that afternoon, like 2 to like 4:30. And it's because that's where people go if they need to run into somebody or if they have to have a quick meeting. And it's less formal space. It's been really effective, and we've shifted it based on the need of people. So we've seen that people need different kinds of space to support what they're doing there. So it's been shifted, but it's C-suite down for sure. The other example, we were walking a client through, and somebody, and I want to say it's somebody who's like a pretty high up position now at Herman Miller, was like sitting, like playing on their phone. and playing on their phone, meaning they were sitting just like scrolling through their phone. And one of the clients we were bringing through said, well, what is he even doing? Is he just like on Facebook? And the response from us was like, well, what if he is? Like, everybody should have a moment to themselves. He's probably waiting for a meeting. He might be checking email. We don't really know, but it's about that trust factor that your people are doing their jobs when you give them the space to do their jobs. And if you're scrolling through Facebook and having a cup of coffee for 5 minutes before a meeting, does it matter? Does that matter to the culture of your company? And for our company, it's like, as long as you're getting your job done and they're giving us the space to support that, it's great. But I think that there is a shift in that more casual atmosphere automatically talking about not doing your job. And I think it's making sure that, you know, from top down, even when you implement spaces like that feel more casual, that work can be done in those spaces. And he may not be answering, he may not be on Facebook, he may be answering emails, he may be looking at a presentation, he may be studying for his next, you know, client interaction, who knows? But I think it's trusting that people are doing what they say they're doing, and we're all adults and we're here to do a good job for our companies and support the culture and support the mission of the company. So we're just coming up on the hour. Just wanted to see if everybody is, if you feel like we have, since the chat is open, if you want a copy of the book, let us know. You can also just say yes or yes, please, or whatever, and send us an email. We can get you some of, there's case studies in here and some more techniques on how to support different kinds of activities. And we'll get you guys a book. And if you want to do follow-up conversations, please, please, please let us know. Robin and I can talk a little bit around the culture and unassigned experience and some things that we're doing around, you know, COVID, basically applications for COVID that can transfer into post-COVID. There's a lot of different things we're talking about around settings and implementing different kinds of designs, and we have a ton of information and research on that. Oh, and I forgot we should talk about next week. Sorry. All right, so next week, happy Thanksgiving. We will not be here. You can sign on, but we won't be here. And then the next few times we have some things set up. So we're talking December 3rd, we're going to talk about microcare. And microcare is it's basically like an antibacterial application that you can add to materials. And so that was going to be something that we know, Alex Bonner, to your point, how do we make sure people are feeling clean? So we'll talk about that. December 10th, we're to be announced, but we think we're going to do something around seating. And then December 17th, we're actually going to keep it really exciting, and we're going to do a holiday trivia event. So sign on, we're going to give away prizes. It's just going to be more of a fun, we'll talk about a little bit of product, a little bit of legacy. But yeah, definitely sign on for the trivia event. It'll be a fun way to kind of bring in the holiday season. So thank you guys for joining, and we hope for you guys to come to the next few mornings with Miller.